Miami Sound Machine, Let It Loose, world premiere weekend. This is Miami Sound Machine lead singer, Gloria Estefan.
I'm 29 years old. I was born in 57. I came over right in January from 59 to 60. So I've grown up in the States, and I was an Army brat. So I moved around a lot at the beginning. I lived in Texas, San Antonio, and in Columbia, South Carolina. But my roots were always really in Miami because my grandparents lived there and my family was there. So it was always like we'd be back to Miami. And that's what happened. We went back to Miami in 1968, and I've lived there ever since. And did all my schooling there. I went to the University of Miami, studied psychology and communications, nothing to do with music. But music's always been my hobby. Since I was about 3 years old, I sang. And my mother sang to me. She was also a dancer and singer when she was in Cuba in school. And I always grew up around music and singing. It was my hobby. That's all I did. I'd lock myself up in my room for 2 and 3 hours a day, just play guitar and sing for my own emotional release. That picture was about 8 years old. I started picking up the guitar by ear, actually, because I just wanted something to accompany myself with. And then they got me a guitar teacher. It was a lot of fun. I grew up on the Army base, so it was a very, separate entity from actually growing up in the city. I remember moving around a lot and making friends and then losing them real quick. But I always had my music, kind of the thread that really wove my life together no matter where we were. I have one younger sister that was born in San Antonio, Texas. No, actually, she's got a good voice, but it really wasn't her calling. She's now into makeup and art. She's going to be traveling with me this whole year, touring with me as my personal assistant and hair and makeup person. So I figure who better to take than my own sister. We're very close. Well, I was kind of like her mom, as a matter of fact, because my mom studied also in her spare time besides working as a teacher. Oh, yeah. Every time her friends would come over, come on out with your guitar and sing for me. And, I'd like lower my head and close my eyes because I was so shy, but I'd play for her. And all her friends would be crying because I do these songs that most of the time when I was 9 years old, I didn't even know what they meant at the time, and they were in Spanish. And I learned them mostly from my grandmother because she loved to hear me sing. They spoke Spanish to me at home, but all my schooling was in English, and I was the only Latin in school. When I started first grade in Texas, I didn't know any English. And by 6 weeks later, I knew English already because I was the only Hispanic at that time in the school. Stupid. That was the first English word I learned. I think the lowest time and the toughest time was when my dad got ill. He became very ill, and he spent many years bedridden before he passed on. And I was growing up, and I was 10 years old at the time when that all started, and my mother had to go out and work, and she was studying. So I was mainly at home at this time and taking care of him and taking care of my younger sister. It was very tough times because, I really needed him at the time as a father, and it was more like I was taking care of him, and I didn't want to break down because I know my mom needed me. I think that's why I was really so involved with music, because music was my only escape. I would literally travel with music, and when I would hear it, it would like evoke so many emotions and great things, and it was just like an escape for me. And that was a real tough time, and it lasted a long time too, because he was ill for like 14 years. It was just real tough. I mean, everybody goes through many tough things in their life, but I think this kind of matured me a little before my time, and I was worried about a lot of things that most kids don't even have to think about, and I think that probably helped a lot in the maturity process in me. Went back to Miami and continued schooling there. Like I was telling you, I went to high school there, Catholic all-girl high school, and kind of like a prep school. So what happened was that I planned to study really hard my first 3 years so that in 12th grade I could just have fun. But by that time I was so used to studying that I took a lot of courses in 12th grade that made it easy for me. When I went into the university, I started as a sophomore because I took a test that gives you a lot of credits. So they gave me 30 credits, and I started as a sophomore. Only spent 3 years in the university. Had a double major in psychology and communications. I have a little theory that most psychology students are out for a lot of self-help. I mean, they're going to kill me, but I was one of them. So I think based on the shyness that I went through and, a lot of things that when I was growing up, probably for my own self-understanding. And I have also always had the desire. I wanted to help people. I was thinking of going into social work, but I found that when I started studying psychology and I really started seeing some case histories, I just couldn't divorce myself emotionally from these things. And I would just get so depressed when I would see some of the cases, and I said, my God, how am I going to treat anybody when I myself, can't handle it? I would just get very, very involved with the case histories, especially the kids. And I graduated and I did the whole thing, but I said, I can't do this with my life because I'm just not cut out for it. I mean, I love to listen to people talk to me, and I'm really objective and try to help them with their problems. Plus, I think I have a face that people trust for some reason. I'd be coming home from school and sitting on the bus, and somebody would sit next to me and tell me all their problems, and, I'd talk to them because it was a long ride, and it was very fulfilling for me. I always wanted to do something that helped people, and that's why I had gone in that direction. But music was always my first love. I didn't have the desire or the competitive edge to go out and really search for a job in music. I always thought to myself, if it's going to happen to me, and if it's meant to be, somehow it's going to happen. I never planned ahead. I never went on auditions. It was just very fulfilling for me just to sing to myself. Simultaneously, when I started there, since I had just gotten out of high school in 75, that's when I started with the group. As a matter of fact, I met Emilio in May, right when I was graduating, but I didn't meet him again till October, and that's when he asked me to join the group. We met. It was funny story. My mom wanted to drag me to this wedding of a friend of hers that I did not want to go to, and I just said, no, I don't want to go. So finally she convinced me to go, and at the wedding was this band called Miami Latin Boys at the time. I remember we bumped into each other in a doorway, and I said, I know you, and he said, yeah, I remember I met you that time, and I loved how you sang. How you doing? And he said, you want to sing a couple of songs with the band? And I said, at the time I go, I don't know if you know any. And he says, well, what do you know? And of course my mom got into the picture because her friends were there and they hadn't heard me sing in a long time. And I said, well, I knew a few Spanish standards. I remember what they were, as a matter of fact. Sabor a mí and Tú me acostumbraste. These are real old Spanish tunes. And the band hated that because bands hate it when people sit in. They just hate that because they go, this person might not have rhythm. They might sing, out of tune. Yeah, right. So Emilio told the guys, don't worry, guys. I've heard her sing before. She should do okay. So actually it went over real well because everybody knew me there. So I got a real big standing ovation. And Emilio really liked it. And he said, listen, I've really been thinking about adding a vocalist to my group because we really don't have a singer. We just kind of play and sing, our own things. Anyway, I told him, I really don't know about this because I don't know if my mom's going to be too happy about me becoming a musician. I was just starting in the university. And he said, well, here's my card. Give me a call if you're interested. I didn't really call him, but 2 weeks later he called me back. And he said, we're having a rehearsal. Why don't you bring your mom over? I live with my parents. This is a hobby for us. It's not the typical musician type thing where we just do club dates and weddings and that type of thing just for fun on weekends. You don't have to quit school or anything. Well, that's how it all started. To tell you the truth, I was so in love with music that I would have done it, just for the experience. So I talked to my mom and I said, look, I'm not going to leave school or anything. I'm just doing this as a hobby. She goes, well, you're old enough to decide, and if you really want to do this, go ahead. I think the businessman in the group is Emilio. By no means am I completely stupid about these things. I've been in the business 12 years, and I do know the right things to do sometimes and some things that you have to avoid doing. But definitely the guy with the business sense is Emilio. Emilio's so cute. I have pictures of Emilio. He had a band in Cuba when he was like 8 years old. He was a band leader already. He's always been like a very organizational type of guy. He played his accordion, and he had like 8 kids that used to play another accordion, maracas, timbales, all kinds of stuff. And he did grow up in Cuba, and it was, already after Castro was already in there. So he saw a lot more of and lived a lot more of the things and of the changes than I did. But he brought all that with him, and he also brought with him the intense desire to be successful. And he also brought with him the knowledge that you can really do anything you put your mind to do in this country, and you could really make a success of yourself no matter where you come from, no matter what you have, because when he moved here, he lived in Spain for 2 years before he moved to the United States. So when he came to the States, he lived with an aunt, and he had to start working, literally as he started school. He started at 15 working, and then he started going to school nights because his father was ill, his mother when she came was ill, and they couldn't work because they didn't speak English. And I remember him telling me that he used to look in the store windows, and he couldn't even buy a belt to hold up his pants. I mean, they used to eat like bread and tomatoes and donuts and things just to fill themselves up. And he would come home from school. He'd work at Bacardi during the day. He'd go to high school at nights, and then he would work for tips in restaurants. That's when he started doing that. And he literally worked his way up from zero. He had nothing. That's why he's such a firm believer in this country and everything that it represents. But music was always a big part of his life ever since he was a little kid. He's an individual that, despite all the things he's been through, it's only helped to make him, I think, a great person. I mean, besides the fact that he's got a great business sense and he loves music, his enthusiasm for life and for everything is really infectious. And he gets along with everybody. I mean, everybody. You have a great life. I mean, we've seen a lot of poverty, we've seen a lot of real big problems, and sometimes people here in the States take that for granted. So we're living a very charmed life, I feel, because we've been able to see and we can enjoy. Sometimes you don't know what you have until you lose it, and we lost it. We lost our country, and we've lost a way of life. At the same time, gained a whole new way of life, and been able to enjoy it with the knowledge of how lucky we are to live in this country. And that's how it all started, working just weekends. I told him I really didn't care about money because, I was doing it as a hobby because I really liked it. That was all. And I really didn't need it at the time. I was kind of putting myself through school, but I had a scholarship, so it wasn't a big expense or anything. That's how everything got started, and we started doing the club dates, and then we started writing. I wrote a couple of tunes, and he said, I'd like to do an album. And we couldn't find any financing anywhere or anybody that was interested because we were just a small local band doing small local gigs. So at the time, we were all ready to go into the studio. Emilio was going to finance it. We were all, kind of putting our savings together to do this. And at that time, all of a sudden, a musician friend of his got a local producer that had a very small label, mostly in the Hispanic market, to back a single. So we went into the studio and we cut the single, just an A and a B side. One was in English and one was in Spanish. And he had a lot of connections with Latin radio in Miami and in Central and South America. And all of a sudden we started hearing the song on the radio. Well, it went to number one like within 2 weeks and stayed there for 3 months at number one, and it wouldn't budge. So we had to run into the studio and finish this real quick LP so that it would have something, we never expected this kind of thing to happen so quick. Renacer was the name of the song. It means rebirth, kind of something like that. And the album did very, very well for us. It introduced us into most of Central and South America. We started touring there, and we got really popular in Miami in the Hispanic market. We did a second album with this guy. That we got about 3 hits off of that, too. We would mostly do these things on weekends. We would fly on a Friday night, do shows on Saturday and Sunday to Costa Rica, Panama. Later on, as it became bigger, Colombia, Chile, Peru. We became famous more outside of Miami before actually Miami, because these places, whenever there's a group that comes from the outside, and especially from North America, they get very excited, and it's actually, how the grass is always greener syndrome. People love you if you're not from there. When you're from there, you have to break out of a lot of molds. In Miami, we had been there for a few years, and we were a local band, so it was hard to break out of this kind of image. But it worked real well because Emilio, marketing man that he is, he really knew what direction to take us musically and business-wise. So this all started picking up little by little. What happened in Miami was there was a lot of bands that were Latin bands, and there was a lot of rock bands, but there was no real band at the time that combined both sounds to the extent that we did. We were really the first generation to grow up in the United States being so close to their roots because of what happened, the situation that had happened in Cuba. So we had kind of like the best of both worlds. And in Miami, there were groups that musically had tried to combine some of these things, but they were mainly Latin. They had not gone into the combination of like rock with percussion, Latin percussion and things like this. So on top of that, we also, since I sang in English and all my life, the songs that I learned were in English, because in Texas and in South Carolina, that's all I listened to, American Top 40 really. And when I came into this group, they did Latin music, so it was like a real good fusion there. They learned American songs for me to sing, and I learned Latin songs to play percussion and to sing also. So we were the only band that could do both things also, not just the combination, but do both American and Latin music. So that was great. When we did our first album in 1976, remember I had told you they were called Miami Latin Boys. So when they saw that I was going to finally stay, we said we got to get rid of the boys because now we've got a girl in the group, Emilio. You got to realize he was my boss. I mean, I worked for him for a year. We didn't even date. Besides, I was so shy at the time, I would never have said anything, and I really didn't care. But he said, no, we're going to get rid of the boys. The Miami he wanted to keep because we wanted to identify with that city. We love that city very much, and we felt that we kind of represented it in a way musically. And they were calling us at the time that we had a kind of Miami sound. So that's where that came from. And the Machine was from the record company that had signed us at the time. It was disco era, and they thought Machine would go over real well. So that's where Miami Sound Machine came from. It came out on our first album like that, 76. After we did that third album that we did ourselves, we signed with CBS International, and they told us, look, we've done kind of like a little marketing research, and since all of your songs that have been hits have been in Spanish, why don't we concentrate more on the Spanish? Because we think they'll sell better in Latin America if you have more Spanish cuts on them. And we said, okay, as long as we can keep the right to when we decide to go ahead and record in English too, because that's also our language. And they said, no problem. And we always, threw in one or two in the albums that we did consecutively with them after, but the bulk was in Spanish. So we did our fourth album with CBS, which was called Regresa a mí, which means Return to Me. Big ballads hits on that one. After that, we did a fifth one called Otra vez, which means one more time. And that was already starting to get the dance influence, because by that time, they had given us producers to work with, and we would always try to convince them, we want to do this percussion thing. We really want to do Latin percussion. And they go, well, but your ballads are your strong point, and let's, bank on that. And we said, we really think we can do something, because live we would do a lot of high-energy stuff, and the crowds would go crazy. They'd love it. In the Hispanic market in the States, not only in Miami, but all over the States, that really took a big boost. And when we started going into New York and into Denver and, little Hispanic areas where we would go and do concerts. So they really widened the market for us in the Hispanic market in the U.S. and in Latin America itself. So we just started like a group that has already 4 or 5 albums under their belt. We had a very big following. We started dating. That's what started after a year. Emilio asked me to go out, and we dated for 2 years. We were both a little scared of, we were having so much success that we thought, what if the personal thing doesn't work out, and we don't want to ruin, what we've got, and you have to think about that. But both him and I think along the same lines, and we said, well, if anything were to happen between us, we'll keep the business end, and we'll go on. He never actually really proposed. I remember we were sitting in his house. It was getting ready to be Valentine's Day, and he had planned to give me the engagement ring on Valentine's Day, but he couldn't stand it. I mean, he just couldn't wait. He's the kind of guy that he'll buy you a Christmas present 10 days before, and he'll have to give it to you. He just can't stand to hide it, So it was February 12th. We're sitting around at his house, and he goes, Mom, would you go get me that package I have over there on top of the dresser drawer? And she brings it, and she's sitting there with us, and he gives me this package, and I open it up. It's an engagement ring. I was speechless because I didn't know what to say. I mean, when the guy's mother is sitting right there, and she was really happy because, we get along great. My mother-in-law and I get along really well. She was very happy, and I was speechless. I said, figures, leave it to you to give me this in front of your mom. Finally, we married in 1978. It's been a great marriage. I think we both really knew that it was meant to happen, but we had never really discussed marriage. I never mentioned it because I always said that when I got married, I wanted the guy to really want to marry me. I didn't want any convincing on my part. I didn't want any pressure on my part. So I never even brought up the subject. And he had never brought up the subject, but we just only went out with each other. And we were together 24 hours practically, because between rehearsing and I would see him every day after work, and we would always be together. We had a son in 1980. He was born on our second anniversary. I kind of planned it that way because my birthday's September 1st and our anniversary is September 2nd. So I had said, well, maybe I'll plan the baby to be born September 3rd. He was born on the 2nd, on our anniversary. So we got lucky there. I'm taking him with me to the Orient this year because he'll be right out of school. And he meets me on weekends when I can't, because I can't pull him out of school now. They have to be there a certain number of days. There is a loss of time, but I happen to think that love is more the quality than the quantity, really. We're very close. I speak to him every day. I call him on the phone. We talk to each other. I make him a part of my life. I in no way want him to think that, I have my life and then there's him. We make him a part. We take him to the sound checks. He goes with us to our work. He goes with us on tour. I've taken him up on stage a couple of times because he's such a ham. He's always out there. I want to go up on stage with you, Mommy. And then you can't drag him off. But he is a very big part of our lives. And then that's when our drummer, Kiki, wrote this song called Dr. Beat. I remember he brought it to us on a tape. And he had his mother playing percussion on it. She was playing a glass, half full of water, a glass that was empty. And he was playing on his dresser drawer, like drums, and singing into this tape. And when we heard the song, we said, this song is a hit. This song is a hit. Just like this, we can tell. So we kind of convinced CBS International to let us put it on the album in English. So then they said, well, we said, what's the difference? There's 10 songs on an album. This was our 7th album. We had thrown songs here and there in English, but they weren't songs that we really felt. They were like ballads and things like that. This song, when we heard it, it hit us. We said, this is the one. By that time, we were doing, like I told you, the huge stadiums. We were very successful in the Latin market, and we had 6 albums under our belt, and we said, it's time to branch out. So by this time, we convinced CBS to put Dr. Beat on our album. And then Emilio convinces him to put it on the B-side of the single, which was a ballad in Spanish. And he said, you're not going to use it anyway, why not just throw it on there? And so at that time, he had a lot of friends in radio and started picking up momentum. So we said, okay, let's do a 12-inch. That's when 12 inches were starting to get popular. In a way, we didn't really experience a frustration only because we had been touring so much. And when you play to 50,000 people at a shot, like we did in Peru in those 6 nights, there's really a lot of fulfillment there. I mean, there's still crowds, whether or not it's Spanish, English, or Swahili. It's still, fans of yours out there screaming for you and wanting to see you. And we had always gone, progressively, we'd done better and better and better and better. So we had never really been stagnant. We had been moving ahead. We just felt that the time had come to grow into another field, and we thought the perfect thing was English. They started playing it, and it got to #1 on the club playlist from Florida, and then it started spreading to New York and to all the club pools in the States. So it reached #1 on the dance charts, and all of a sudden it got exported to Europe. The next thing we know, they're calling us from England. Your song is number 16 on the pop charts. It had reached #1 on all the dance charts in Holland, Germany, France, Spain, England. And then it had jumped into the pop charts in England. And they said, we want you to come over here to do Top of the Pops, which is a television show that's been going on for years and years. I mean, the Beatles were on that show. Dr. Beat got to top 3 on the pop charts in all of these countries. And we became instantly very well known in Europe. In the States, on the dance chart, I think it reached number 12. The people from the States thought we were a European group. The Europeans thought we were from Italy, but nobody really knew where we were from. And then our success in Europe really opened the door for us in the States, because then we took Dr. Beat and we re-recorded the album in English. The 7th album where Dr. Beat appeared was completely produced by Emilio. So we were under complete control of that, and we were really able to put our ideas out and do what we had wanted to do all along, and even more so on the Primitive Love album. And we said, are you interested in working with us on an album in English? We go, it's a big chance we're taking because, it's a Latin company we're signed with, but they said that they'll take the chance, that they'll go ahead and they'll back us in an all-English language album. And we said, you want to work on this? And he said, sure. So he gave us some tunes, which were Primitive Love, Bad Boy, Uh-Oh, Falling in Love. They had a lot of tunes on this album. I wrote Words Get in the Way. We just started putting this thing together. So we worked on the sound, which they were very instrumental in this album. They call themselves the Tri-Jerks. That's their name, their company name, Tri-Jerks, like 3 jerks. They said, we're just jerks. That's the name we want to call ourselves. So I said, are you sure about this? I said, yeah, that's what we want to call ourselves. So then we started working very closely with them, and we came up with the Primitive Love album. We gave it to Disco CBS, and they took it to the convention, the international convention, and presented it as their new product. But we told them, look, we've toured in all these places. These people love music in English. I mean, we've been to Latin America. They love it. They know we're a bilingual group. We wanted to go out with Conga only because we wanted to keep our Latin audience. We wanted to show them that we were not going to give up our Latin roots, that we were going to venture into something and try to expand, but that we weren't going to try to hide, what we were or change our sound or become rock and roll just to get into this market. We believed in the sound that we had, and we thought it was the right time for it, actually. But when they heard it, they loved it a lot more money. But we believed in it, and we said, this is our shot. What else were we to do? We were either going to be doing the kind of thing we were doing for the rest of our life, and it was really a shame to just throw away a possibility like that. And plus, we believed in the song so much. We just really believed in that album, and we thought, we know that if we can get it out there, it'll happen. On the plane from Amsterdam to London, he wrote Conga. And he was banging on the tray table. And he's got a real loud voice. He had the headphones on, and people are staring at him, and he's going, da-da, playing on the tray table. And when he played it for us in London, I go, this song's a hit. This song is a hit. Also, it was so exciting, like when things in Billboard, for the first time in the history of Billboard, an artist had a one song simultaneously on 4 charts. Conga was simultaneously on the dance chart, the Latin chart, the pop chart, and the black chart. And it was the first time that had ever happened. A conga is a rhythm, it's an Afro-Cuban rhythm, which came about when they brought the slaves into Cuba. They brought their African rhythms with them, and this combined with the Latin music that was already there, and they created a rhythm called the conga. And what would happen is very similar to what the Brazilians do at carnival time with sambas. Every year, once a year in Cuba, they have carnival time, and everyone would just go out into the streets, and you'd have all these musicians with the conga drums that they would tune by fire, because they're skins. and frying pans and things like this. And this rhythm was created in the streets. And the people, after these people would come by playing all this stuff, just people would dance behind them for miles and miles and miles. It's a party tune. It was an infectious kind of thing. And I don't think you have to know how to dance or know how to dance that rhythm. I think it just made people move. And I remember having stories about people in Seattle, Washington, that in an insurance company, every time that the song would come on, they'd all get up and dance around the room. And it was like this kind of thing that was coming back to us. It was a lot of happy things, you know. Back in the 40s, they had the conga with Cugat. He brought it in, Javier Cugat. And they had it in a lot of movies that I've seen that they were doing the conga and stuff. But nobody had done it recently, and nobody had mixed it with dance music and with a very funk-oriented bass line. It was a very mix. So that's what you're hearing in conga. It's a mix between a Cuban conga percussion, American dance music drums, and very funk-oriented bass line. That's what conga was. And in the Midwest, we did the best concerts, I think, in Burlington, Iowa, which is really a small town. Well, I'll tell you one thing. They have this festival called Steamboat Days. They invited us to come play, and they decided they wanted to try to break the world's record for the world's longest conga line, which I didn't even know they had a record at the time, but somebody in Europe had a record, 6,000 some odd people. These people broke the record with 11,142 people at this concert doing the conga. I also broke the record for the world's longest conga singing, I think, ever. It was pretty tiring, but it was so exciting to see. And for us, that whole tour in the Midwest was very exciting because we got to meet people, places that didn't have any Hispanics. This place, Burlington, Iowa, had one Latin family. They came to visit us backstage. And it was just so much excitement created that for us, that was the biggest thrill. I mean, we were in Japan, we were in Europe. The biggest thrill for us was the Midwest. Because for them to have accepted that style of music and accepted our song was a big, big thing for us. Actually, I remember being really impressed when I was 6 years old in Texas with Ferry Across the Mersey by Jerry and the Pacemakers. I used to love that song. And I remember memorizing that, and that was one of the first things I wanted to learn when I played the guitar because it stuck in my mind from when I was 6 years old. All the Bee Gees tunes. That was when I was a little older, 10, 11. How Do You Mend a Broken Heart? I Started a Joke. All the music that I ever heard was American music. And then when I moved back to Miami, that's when I started getting the Latin influence. So as an age group, we were the first ones that really grew up with such a strong American influence. There's other musicians that are our age in Miami also, but a lot of them went strictly for the rock. Because the reason that I kept the Latin music is because Emilio, who came over from Cuba when he was older, still had that real deep Latin influence. But he was really involved in music, so he enjoyed listening to all different kinds. So it was like, I think it's a moment in time really that we've captured also in the music, and a cultural phenomenon that happened in Miami because there's so many Hispanics in comparison also to Anglos. I don't know if it's created so much because obviously Santana did this when they combined, but they were more rock and the Hispanic influence. We weren't that rock oriented. If you listen to a lot of our songs, it's more pop-oriented, I think, than Santana was. But Santana had happened 10 years before. He was really on the forefront of this. But it was a different feel. What he was mixing in with the rock music wasn't specifically maybe salsa or some of the elements that we mix in. It was definitely Latin percussion, but I think he had his own style within that. I loved Santana. At the time when Santana came out, I loved all the things that he was doing. But at the time, musically, we were somewhere else. The first music that we did was mainly ballads. The song that became a hit was a ballad. So we didn't start with the dance music. Our forte and most of our hits in Latin America were ballads. We usually, what we would do when we would go into these countries, obviously we were very popular among the affluent societies and in these countries. So we would do usually, like for example, a benefit. And like in Costa Rica, for example, we spoke to the first lady of the country. She would bring us down because it's very difficult for them to be able to pay for such a large group to come down and, you know, all the expenses and everything. So we would combine it as a government type of thing where they would have a very big type of concert for the affluent society where they would pay a lot of money and it would all be donated to a cause. Like, for example, in Costa Rica, they have like a boys' town over there. And we donated our services. So they would bring us down to Costa Rica and, you know, just cover the expenses of the group. Any money they would make would go towards adding a new wing to this boys' town because they were so overcrowded that they literally did not have any place to put these kids. So as a matter of fact, they were so cute because they invited us back 2 years later and they had named the building Miami Sound Machine. And they gave us a dinner and they sang for us. And it was really a very touching thing. All the guys were crying in the group because these little kids, you know, they sang this song to us that they had written for us. And you'd see, you know, the tears. And all the guys in the band, and it was really a very emotional moment. I've found more similarities than differences, not only in Latin America, but in everywhere in the world that we've traveled. Probably, I've analyzed it a little bit. I figure anybody that goes to your concert is a fan, knows your music. And if we have some very high energy music, so the type of people that would like this type of music, I think tend to be energetic type of people, people that are into dance music too. So we get these kind of people at the concerts. I remember when we went to Japan, they said, don't be surprised if they're very respectful, they'll applaud, but don't expect the effusive reaction you get probably in the rest of your concerts. That wasn't true at all. By the second song, they were dancing in their seats. They came up on stage with me to dance, in Japan. Believe me, they did it. I have pictures of the thing. People don't believe it. They on stage with me doing the conga. People in the aisles doing the conga. And I learned a little bit of Japanese, just a few little things. But still, everywhere we've gone, I've found the audiences have been great. I've never really had a problem with an audience being cold or distant or anything. Well, I'll tell you, it's sometimes it was a little scary because some of these countries are having problems. But you can't really think about it because we said the day that we let somebody else control, where we go or where we don't go, it's going to be just like if we're living in a kind of prison ourselves. Well, I'll tell you, we've been really lucky. As a matter of fact, we probably were more in danger from the fans than from the actual terrorists, only because they get so excited. I remember when we played Colombia last year in December, we were in a place that held 18,000 people, and there were still like 5,000 to 6,000 people outside that couldn't get in. So they were pretty mad. We did 6 concerts throughout the country, but like in Bogota, for example, this is the biggest place to play. So we're out there, and we're playing, and they were literally so excited that they were like jumping up on the stage, and we had a lot of security guards trying to hold them back. And then after the concert, they didn't want to leave, and it was that kind of thing. We've gone through more. They were rocking the bus because somebody blocked our exit, and we got trapped back there, and they got a hold of the bus. They broke the windows. All they want to do, they don't want to hurt you. They just want to touch you or really get close to you. Politics has been so close to our lives only because what happened to us as a people, and having to leave our country, and mainly more our parents and myself, because I really didn't have to suffer through that. I can't say that I did because I didn't. I was a baby, and I really don't remember. But I did see what our parents went through, especially our grandparents, who had to be uprooted when they were in their 50s and 60s, and that's a big shock for anybody to make such a big change, And it was a very close political situation. I mean, I'm sure there's artists that are very successful being very political in their lyrics. But to me, music is something that I don't want to be tied with something that is so saddening. When I go to Latin America and these people come to see me in concert, they go to escape from their everyday problems, and they live this every day. They live this fear every day. They live this terrorism. They have to live through that. I'd rather keep music. To me, it's kind of like an escape. It's always been an escape to me, so I don't see tying politics in with it at all. We've got our own production because Emilio produces the album, with the Jerks, and at the same time, we have our own publishing company. We publish our own songs. That helps too. The main thing we do when we're in a studio is we have a good time. And as a matter of fact, Larry's mom the other day, she stopped by and she saw all these toys and she goes, "Do you have children here?" And I go, "No, those are our toys." We do all these kind of weird things. We have a mascot that's this plastic inflatable shark that we take him everywhere, in the studio. When I'm doing vocals, I take him with me in the vocal booth, or else he's sitting on top of the thing. It's Eric's shark, because Eric's the engineer. By the way, that's another type of thing that I think comes through. I think that the feeling that's going on in the studio when you're recording goes on the vinyl. I don't know how, but I think it does. And we've been working with the same recording engineer for the past 6 albums, Eric Schilling. Very talented guy. And we're a great production team because we're in there and we have such a good time that the hours go, sometimes we'll go in at 12 noon and we won't come out till 5 in the morning, and it all goes by so quickly. It's a very close team, and it works really well because we have enough people so that if somebody gets stuck, you go see what you can come up with here, that kind of thing. Emilio gives a lot of the ideas to them to translate musically of what he wants to do. And it's a real great production team. Basically, yes, the name came about. Emilio hired everybody way back in 75, but we're really like a family. Kiki Garcia, the drummer, has been with us from the beginning. Oh, God, Kiki plays every kind of drums. You should see him on stage. It's really funny. He plays a wood kit also, but then on top of that, he has the electronic kit. Then he's got a set of timbales. He's got some congas. He's got all kinds of percussion. He's got a huge section. He's just wild with that stuff. And in conga especially, he comes up to the front and he plays timbales only. Now on stage, we've got a really, really good group. because people think this is the nucleus of their group, but when you see Miami Sound Machine, it's not 3 people, it's 11 people on stage. We've got on bass a guy named George Casas, who's very, very talented guy. On guitar, John DeFaria, Clay Oswald on synthesizers, Jim Trumpeter on synthesizers and piano. We have a brass section with a trumpet, trombone, which are Teddy Millette and Randy Barlow. And then we have, which I'm very happy this year, on sax we have a guy named Ed Calle, who has his own deal with Epic also, and just came out with a solo jazz album. Oh, and on percussion we have Rafael Padilla, and he's got like a whole section of really strange toys. His hobby is to collect percussion instruments from everywhere we go, and he's got the weirdest stuff you've ever seen. And it's really interesting to watch him on stage because he's got like a cage of stuff between congas, timbales, bongos, and all these different percussion instruments that sound so unique. And a lot of them we've used on the new album now. Very special types of sounds that we have both live because we have him with us, thank God, and also on the record. We experimented with a lot of new little toys this year. Some of my favorite tunes are the ones that the Tri-Jerks wrote. They're a team of writers. They're Joe Galdo, Larry Dermer, and Rafael Vigil. And what they do is Joe and Larry, I call them Mo Curley, and because these guys, they bring outside material, but they exclusively write with us too. And they're going to be writing now, and Emilio's also going to be producing someone I can't mention the name yet because but he's someone very big in the rock field, and they're going to write some tunes for him and produce 3 of his songs. It's going to be a surprise for everybody. I think they really outdid themselves in this album because I love to do other people's material. I'm so picky about my own stuff that I really enjoy singing other people's material, and they wrote it specially for us. A lot of Emilio's influence in telling them what kind of thing we were looking for and reworking songs that they wrote. But I love the material on this album. And when I did this album, I learned a lot of things about myself. I learned that the songs that are more comfortable or quicker for me to sing, or that, sound the best, the quickest. We work on mostly vibe, we call it. We try to get a feeling across, not only with the music, but with the lyrics and the style that it's sung in. I think that what I like so much about this album and that I enjoyed is that each song that I did has its own individual type of vibe. Each song we tried to capture a feeling and an emotion in it, and they sound real different to me, and that to me it feels real good, because when I'm listening to myself I sound different here, even though you can tell it's the same person, but it's got a different feeling to it. And I found that I'm really I love to belt out those love songs. When I write a tune in English, because it depends, sometimes I'll get an inspiration in Spanish and I'll write the song originally in Spanish, or vice versa, I'll get the inspiration in English. When I go to rewrite it in the second language, I don't translate. I start from scratch. I get an idea, and I try to convey the same meaning that I did when I wrote the tune originally, but I don't by any means try to translate, because it just does not work. Spanish and English are 2 completely different languages. They're 2 completely different ways of saying the same thought, but you can't translate, because to me it doesn't work. It's hard for me to write when I'm in a good mood, because it's... Usually love songs are born of really deep emotions and depression and sadness and all this. And I really have nothing to be sad about because I've got it great. So when I'm going to write, I have to be alone so I can concentrate. That's the first thing. But when I sat down to write a song after words get in the way, I said, each song to me is like having a child. But when I start writing it, and then by the time I finish writing it and we produce it and we sing it and record it, I say, my God, I'll never be able to do this again. And panic sets in. You kind of sit down in front of the piano, because even though I don't play the piano, I hear the chords in my head that I want, and then I have to sit there like a fool picking them out one by one, and then memorizing the thing, and then writing it down real quick note for note so that I can take it to the keyboard player, because I never studied piano or music, but I'm going to do it this year. You watch. While I'm on tour, I'm going to have them give me piano lessons, so at least I can write easier, for God's sake. The ideas start coming. Usually either I'll get an idea or an inspiration. In this case, I had gotten the line, "Can't stay away from you," in my head. And it was just rolling around in my head for days, and it started evoking a feeling in me. And then I started getting myself into this whole situation. I imagined myself, in the situation that I'm writing the song about. And I'm actually vicariously feeling all these emotions, and that's the way that I write. And then once I start feeling them, I try to think, well, how would, in conversation, somebody say to somebody else what I'm trying to say emotionally? Because I always try for the lyrics to be something that anybody on the street, when they hear it, they identify and say, yeah, I'd like to be able to say that to somebody, and then give them the vehicle of doing it. I think that's what a love song is, and that's how these things are born in me. Especially that's how that song was. That's right. That's the street we live on, as a matter of fact. And this happened way back before the Anglo success. The mayor of Dade County, Miami, Steve Clark, he had been traveling extensively, and everywhere he'd go, he'd hear about us, but he hadn't heard about us in Miami as much as he had when he traveled. So he came back and he told us, he called us, and he said, "You people are really acting as goodwill ambassadors to the city, because everywhere I go, I see your videos, and everywhere people tell me that you're always talking very highly about Miami and that you love it and all this." And he says, I want to change the name of the street where you guys live to Miami Sound Machine Boulevard, officially. So he brought it up before the commission, because they have to vote on that stuff, and it was unanimous. They said yes, and then we had a big block party, closed off the street, and unveiled the signs, and just had a great time that day. They've stolen them 3 times already. They've had to replace them yet. Fans come up and rip them off. We just bought another property in Miami, but we're not moving, we're leaving our offices on Miami Sound Machine Boulevard. The great thing is, we've lived in that neighborhood for so long. I mean, ever since we got married, and Emilio a year before that, because he bought the house thinking of us getting married, and he lived in it a year before we moved in, since before I moved in. And everybody's family. Everybody knows me. I feel real comfortable in the neighborhood. And even though there's been a lot of success and they're real happy for me, it's very normal, because they've grown up with me and I've grown up with them. Everybody keeps asking me, do you want to go out solo? Do you want to go out by yourself? I am. I'm solo already. I'm the only singer in the group. They're going to know my name. It's Miami Sound Machine is a part of me. I'm part of it. We've been together for so long. I love the fact that I'm touring with people that I enjoy being with. I think I'd be very lonely out there by myself. I'm too used to these guys. They're like my family. That was a real big step for us. Pepsi came to us and said that they were interested in having us as spokespersons for their soft drink, which is a great coincidence, because I drink Diet Pepsi anyway, so that was a great thing for me. I really do. They had done marketing research, and they saw that we were the first group that would simultaneously be able to hit the Hispanic market and the Anglo market at the same time. When we did the commercial, we did the same takes in English and then in Spanish. It's using the song Conga with new lyrics, which I thought were really good. I told them I didn't know any way that we could rewrite these lyrics, because, Conga's ingrained in my head. And they said, we'll write it. And I said, okay, we'll see. So they wrote it, and they really came up with some great lyrics. I think it's really catchy. And a lot of people might not even notice that it's a commercial until they hear the word Pepsi in it, because we remixed it, and it's got the same vibe as Conga. The extras were all from Miami. We told them we wanted to do it in Miami because we wanted that feeling. And we wanted the people that were in it to be from Miami, because they know us so well, and nobody had ever seen us the whole year we'd been touring, and the audience was great. It was like doing a concert. And right between the takes, we'd start playing all the percussion stuff, and people would keep dancing. It was a lot of fun. Definitely, this year is going to be a much bigger tour, and definitely with Pepsi sponsoring us, we are going into bigger arenas. But I think it's a good timing in the fact that the album's coming out with the commercial at the same time, and one is going to help the other. The album is very, very special to me. I've enjoyed so much doing this album and singing this album. It's got a lot of heart, my heart and soul in it. I believe in it very much. Needless to say, every artist, I'm sure, says the same thing. But I have a feeling that the public is really going to like this. We tried to give them what they liked from Miami Sound Machine and our style and everything, but we've tried to move ahead a little bit and do a couple little different types of things so that people don't get bored. We've always tried to do that on each of our albums, change a little bit and grow. And anyway, as people, we do that anyway. We're not the same people this year as we were last year. We've spent a year touring the whole world and getting a lot of experience and being on stage. Like, we did 102 concerts this year. A lot of stage experience under our belts besides the one we had before. And I think it all shows in the album. It definitely shows. And I'm very happy with the songs. I wrote a lot more on this one. I have 2 ballads that I wrote. One called Can't Stay Away From You, and the other one called Anything For You. I also co-wrote a song with the drummer, Kiki. I co-wrote 2 with him. One called Rhythm Is Gonna Get You, and the other one called 1, 2, 3, where he did some music and lyrics, and I did some music and lyrics. We co-wrote this one together. Usually I finish an album and I don't listen to it anymore, because all I hear is the technical things that I wish I would have done different. But this album, I just don't get tired of listening to it. I really enjoy listening to it. Well, the title of this album is called Let It Loose. It's the message that we had for the people out there listening to it. I think a lot of the music on it they're going to be able to hear, and even the lyrics, some of them, is just telling people to loosen up and enjoy the music. It's called I Want You So Bad. And their concept was to do something with no drums, just very lush strings and very lush background, and just me singing over it. And I have a little part that Rafael does in the song too, of background, like a little duet piece in the song. And it was a different concept for a ballad also, because we wanted the ballads to be different. We didn't want them all to be the same. And I wanted to stretch myself a little bit because that song has my highest note and my lowest note in my range practically. It goes from really a wide range, and it was a big challenge for me to do. And I looked forward to it, and I was very relieved when I finished it, and it turned out like I wanted it. Not so much a lot of work, but it was a challenge for me vocally to do this song. And he said, "Come on, that's what I want you to do," because he said, "I really love the low notes that you have." And I wanted everybody to see how, and I said, "Well, Ralph, I'm going to try my best." And I really liked how it turned out. And then we have a song called Surrender, which is very island to me. It gives me the feeling of Miami, the Caribbean, that whole atmosphere, sun, sails I see when I hear that song, because it's got very calypso feeling. One of the parts on there is done with a steel drum kind of sound, but not exactly. It's got Betty Wright on background vocals with me, who I think is a great singer. And if you remember, she had Clean Up Woman and a lot of big hits. And she's in Miami and working very closely with us because she was downstairs doing her album. And we said, would you like to do something? Because she's got such a great feel for what she did. She did both on Bet You Say That and on Surrender some things. And that song to me is just like party time, outside in the sun, people dancing in the streets kind of feeling. And a lot of spicy variety in there, I think. And it kept me interested the whole time when I was doing it. It wasn't a dull moment for me. There's this one song called Love Toy on here, which I'm in love with, because number one, the piano, the guy that played on Conga, Paquito Echevarria, he played a solo on Conga, the piano solo. We brought him back to do this solo on Love Toy, and he did a fantastic job. And it's a very different type of tune for me to be singing, because it's also very light, but it's sexy in a way. And I think the kind of thing that every woman imagines herself at some time, to be like, because we all have that side, where we try to feel that we're attractive to people. And also, it's very cute in the hook, Love Toy, and the things that it says in there, It's very cutesy type of thing, that song, and I liked it a lot. Then they have Bet You Say That to All the Girls, which I think is great. It's so typical of a lot of the things we girls go through. When he writes, he thinks of me, obviously, because he's writing these songs for me. I especially love, all these lines that the guys say to you, and it's this guy that's really after this girl, and she's saying, yeah, okay, but I bet you say that to all the girls. And I'd never come across a song that really said it that well. The things that he says in there. It's funny to me when he gives me the demos, because he sings them with the lyrics that were meant for me, and it sounds hilarious to me. I go, which one you do? He also is doing the background, a lot of the background parts on this album. The male vocals are him, Rafael Vigil. He's got a real grovelly, great voice to really give you feeling. When I hear him do the parts, it really gives me a feeling that he was trying to evoke in the thing, and then I pick up on that. So I love to hear him do the demos. Let It Loose, the title cut. And it's really rock and roll to me. When he wrote it and he put the Papu Mau Mau's Papu Mau Mau Mau, that really took me back like to the 60s and very rock and roll. And I love that tune only because it's a little different from some of the stuff that we've done, and it was taking a little step ahead for us there. It was just a lot of fun to do. We tried an effect with the vocals. I doubled my exact part twice. So it's not a digital effect that you're hearing on there. It's actually me singing the same line, doubling myself twice, which came really an interesting effect on the vocals, I think. That's a great tune, too. 1, 2, 3 is about somebody. It's really, very light tune. It was meant to be dance-oriented, and what the story behind it is a girl that's trying to draw a real shy guy out of his shell. And she's telling him, the hook is 1, 2, 3, 4, come on, baby, say you love me 5, 6, 7 times. 8, 9, 10, 11, I just want to keep on counting until you're mine. But the lyrics themselves in the verse, that's a real light hook. But it was real hard to get the lyrics to serious it up a little bit, you know what I mean, to take away from so much lightness in the hook. So it turned out a story about a guy that's really shy, and the girl's just trying to get him. She knows he loves her and he wants her, but he just can't get up enough nerve to do it, so she's just trying to teach him. Come on, it's real easy. I'll show you how to do it. Rhythm Is Gonna Get You was written by Kiki Garcia, our drummer, and myself. And what happened was that Kiki had started writing this tune somewhere last year in the middle of the tour. I remember we were on tour, and he had some ideas about it, but lyrically he hadn't figured out everything he wanted to do, and he was really stuck with it. So he asked me that if I wanted to help him out on the song, and I said sure. So he played it to me on his leg, which is his favorite instrument. He'll stand around and go like this, playing on his leg, and sing along. And he sang it to me. And it was like, that I'm gonna get you. He still didn't know what he wanted to put in there, in the hook line, but he did have the melody there. And he had the first verse, which was, at night when you turn off all the lights, there's no place that you can hide. He said that he was stuck, and he gave it to me. And I remember we were somewhere in Kentucky,
and I was up in my room thinking about what to do with this song, and I got the idea for Rhythm Is Gonna Get You because he had played so many different rhythms on his leg that it was really interesting. So then after we had written the song, we decided to put in some more Afro-Cuban rhythms, but not like a conga, but a completely different rhythm that was done during the Afro-Cuban religious ceremonies that they had. So this is where the whole idea for the video came also. The video is based on a live performance and documentary footage of these Afro-Cuban dances being done. Actually, it's one of my favorite cuts on the whole album, and definitely I think the rhythm is going to get you when you hear this. The chants, one of them has significance. Oe oe is a real good sound that everybody can repeat. We especially thought about it when people were dancing or in the clubs or something, that they could repeat this chant along with us and sing it. And the ya llegó means it's here in Spanish. That's what it really means. But we didn't want it to sound like it meant anything, so we got Americans that didn't know what it meant to sing it, so it would sound like a chant more than actually it is here. But that is the hidden meaning, is it's here, the rhythm is here.
I want a vacation. No, actually, I have everything I want. I really do. What I want is to be able to keep on making a living, doing what I love to do, and I want my son to grow up healthy and happy, and I want to have another one and another child, boy or girl, I don't care, and I want to be able to enjoy my life like I'm doing now, with my family, and just live like everybody else. The great thing about it is that I'm really happy doing what I do, and that if we can make a living at it, that's wonderful. And music to me is everything besides all the other obvious things that I have in my life, like my son and my husband. This has been definitely the happiest year of my life. I'm fulfilled in my home life. I'm married to a man that I love very much, and we get closer every day. We have a very stable, very solid marriage. We have a very healthy son. I've got the career that I love. I'm making a living at what I love doing, and it's a very fulfilling time for me. It's just wonderful, and it's great to be able to enjoy all these emotions and still have the public, give all this warmth back to you and the affection back. It's great. Like they say, the overnight success has been a real long night, I'll tell you that much.